We set up an entire fake music festival as a front.
As an original member of Woo Woo, the billion-dollar hacking club, a board member of the Honeynet Project and CEO and president of the Logan Group, Ralph Logan, also known as sangfroid, has been at the forefront of cybersecurity since the beginning.
I met some of the fellas from L0pht, a hacker collective out of Boston.
They testified in front of Congress at one point, and they talked about
The
famous panel.
The Last Supper of the internet with Mudge Jesus. I think a lot of it, that Boston scene, had their roots in MIT. It was immersive. People say you want to learn a foreign language, go live in the country. That is what you did. I joke with George Kurtz and Chris Prozice. They took a PR photo and they all had matching shirts with monogrammed Foundstone. And so we cool kids were all like, ha! You guys sold out. Hey, nice matching shirts, and meet at the country club later. That time of my life, people bring up TV shows and popular culture stuff. I have never seen an episode of Seinfeld, Friends, whatever those shows were that people talk about. It was just 100% spent on computers and networking hacking. It wasn't a closed or click group. It was just like, how can anyone think to do anything but this? I don't know, they're crazy. This is the future. I know it's the future. We're living in the future, kind of thing. It was wonderful.
Ralph Logan, thanks for doing this, man.
Thanks.
I really appreciate you coming. I've known you for 10, 15 years, maybe longer. Let's start from the very beginning. Where are you from?
I was born in Houston, Texas. And shortly after, we moved out to the Texas Hill Country, Kerrville specifically. And then various places in the Hill Country, New Braunfels, but eventually settling in back in the Houston area, Northwest Houston area, Magnolia, Texas, where I finished out my schooling up there.
What did you get into as a kid? Was it mostly focusing on computers, or
Yes. Yeah, it really was. I mean, I was the one in the house that took appliances apart and or clock radios or fixed the Intellivision controller when it wore out. But more than just taking it apart, I was the one that could also put it back together, make sure it worked, It may have a part missing from it, but
still worked.
It still worked. So my dad's father specifically is where he learned to do all these things. And in fact, from the time my dad and his brother moved into their design firm that they had for many years, they gave their fabrication business, the bell-mouth business, all that to my grandfather on my paternal side, and he worked and ran that up until his death. And then my maternal side grandfather was also an engineer, and he spent his career doing facility design and facility operations for major universities. I think he was one in Tennessee where he's from, but then he came down, he was at University of Houston, and then ended his career at Texas A&M doing all that. And he's the one that actually got me interested in electronics.
Okay.
Originally. He and I built my first computer, in quotes. It was almost an analog computer, breadboard, and switches and LEDs, to do basic calculation type things.
When you say built it, you guys literally built it up
Physically, from breadboard, wire, solder, lights, toggle switches. My maternal grandfather was the one that gave me my first computer.
Commodore 64 or even?
No. Oh, gosh, it was the one with the big 16K module add-on. It was black as about this.
This even predates like the Apple
Sinclair.
IIe? Okay.
It was a Sinclair.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. No, it's like even the keyboard was just like those bubble buttons. It wasn't even a proper keyboard. And a cassette player where you would connect the audio port to audio port and hit record and save your data onto it. And that's when I really started getting fascinated with it, was how that storage worked on magnetic tape. It was puzzling. And back then, he also got me a subscription to Byte magazine. Then the concept, I read in the magazine one time, these people were using modems. That's what got me interested in the telephone system and how it actually worked, switches, all that kind of thing. And there was nothing that we had for reference materials back then, especially out in the country. But I did discover that the local control office for Southwestern Bell back then was only a good 6 or 7 miles from my house. And so when I started driving at 16, I was able to go over there and take a look in their dumpster and see if there were manuals and those kind of things. So I started making a routine of going and picking through their trash at night, because just a dumpster beside the big building, no one cared. It was 82, 83. But that's where I started becoming interested in the power of computing more so than just this Apple computer, because I didn't have any exposure to it. After graduation, bummed around a bit and had various menial jobs, but then I got interested in pursuing EMS as a career, and became an EMT paramedic. Eventually went on to work at Methodist Flight Services there in Houston.
So like you're talking about like when there's something serious and they can't even send, they need to send a helicopter
Critical
out.
care, yeah.
Okay, wow. And
so Flight Services helicopter. Working in the flight department there is where I got my real exposure to computing systems. We were working on a Windows 3.1 computer that was networked with, was it OS2? OS2, which a lot of hospitals used back then. And that's where I worked with this other guy in the office there that I really got exposed to databases, how the larger scale computings work. And I spent many a long night. We would work 13-hour shifts and spent many a long night doing data input. But half of that I'd be exploring the networking portion of it.
When you say 13-hour shifts, because so I'd assume you would have a flight plan. You'd go pick someone up, but 13-hour shift. Were you in your downtime? You were also, I guess, in the ER.
Yep, working in the ER also. Depended on what the demand was, basically.
What is that? I've never experienced anything like that. Does that just take a toll on you after a while, and then you need to?
It does, and I was 24 or 5 years old, married, new baby, and it gets to be it's different it was for me working in that setting as the hospital emergency than it was for me being a young man working out on the streets, carrying packaging, delivering. So it was hard for me to normalize internally the amount of things I was working with and seeing. And so due to that, and I discovered that on the career path I was on, the paramedic track, that I wasn't going to be making that much money. I was working with nurses and doctors and all this, and I started thinking, well, I don't know how this is going to work for me.
It's still you're on the front lines. It's still a huge experience that most people don't get to have. Like what was your biggest takeaway from that experience? What was the biggest, lessons that you learned or things that you took with you as you moved on into computers later?
If you're working in the emergency room, you're in Bay 6 at, 8 p.m. and you've got a patient with a high fever or a medical incident or whatever. 2 hours later, that same Bay 6 is holding a gunshot wound, right? So it's the experiential, I guess, the place where you experience it that was more difficult for me. Seeing those things happen in the same place. You can't leave that place.
Right.
You can't. Sure, you can go take a break, but you're working 13 hours or whatever, And I just have utmost respect for the people that are able to compartmentalize that and go home afterwards. But eventually, for me, it wasn't the injuries or medical incidents or any of that got to me working that. It was the seeing the same 5-year-old with a broken right arm this time in Bay 6 that was there 2 months ago with a broken left arm or broken out teeth or traumatic head injury or all these things, because my daughter was 6 months old, I guess, at this time when I was working there. She was born while I was working there. And it got to a point to where the eventual tearing down or wearing down of my ability to provide patient care all got to a point where I could no longer emotionally handle doing it to these abused children that came in, and they continue to come in. It was really where I think I started to see how shitty people are.
And then
Not just to themselves, but to defenseless folks. It goes the same way, I guess, with the elderly. There's so many abused elderly people out there and all that kind of thing. I just couldn't take it. Couldn't do it.
and seeing those children, and then coming back and seeing your daughter and seeing that that's someone's child that's going through that, and the innocence of that, just realizing you didn't have the tools, like I think you had mentioned, to be able to cope with that, and so ultimately you knew you needed to leave.
By then, I had got back into dialing into BBSs and
What is a BBS?
Bulletin board systems that local, of course, because we need toll charges. In the Houston area, there were some really good ones. I don't remember the name of them now, but they were mostly informatic for me. To once again learn about what new things in programming there was. I think that's where I got a copy of Borland, which is a software development package from way back when.
And so these BBSs or bulletin boards, you basically call into a computer that was a BBS, and there would just be stuff there for you, whether it's files or Borland or whatever the case is. And
yeah. So the BBS would either be a single modem that somebody shared their computer with the BBS software on, or some BBSs had a rack of modems that would answer when you call in. So they would, you would also have to, there's time limits put on it. You had to earn credits, in order to be able to stay on certain long. They would disconnect you after certain many minutes. So it was when I first started dialing into them, I realized that there's got to be some way to get around these limitations. And then I discovered the Cult of the Dead Cow text files, T files.
And this was all after
one of them.
EMT, or while you were still there? Okay.
It was after, so early 90s.
And Cult of the Dead Cow. So that's was that BBS? That wasn't in Houston. That was
Lubbock.
In Lubbock. Okay.
I discovered them on one of the Houston local. And that's what got me interested in hacking.
And for those that don't know, can you just talk a little bit about Cult of the Dead Cow and kind of the history of that? Like what is?
Sure, I'm an outsider, but it was founded, as I think you said, in Lubbock, Texas. Grandmaster Rat and some friends, I think. They were a subversive, anarchic, not even hacking type group that wrote these text files, which they called T files, and it was everything from fictional stories to technical to, down with the man, fiction, nonfiction, just interesting kind of underground magazine type text files, of which notable presidential candidate from I think 2 cycles ago, Beto O'Rourke was a member. Psychedelic Warlord was his handle. There were all kinds of crazy people, and I enjoyed the underground, slant to it all. I've since become friends with a lot of those folks.
So Beto O'Rourke, that's a name. U.S. Congressman, U.S. Senate candidate for Texas, and then ultimately presidential candidate. And so the CDC, obviously I wasn't there, but just when I read, it's sort of a collection of people that are coming together. And so you're starting to get exposed. But from EMT, if I remember from the notes, you actually went to oil and gas next. Is that right?
No, I went to work for a PC company in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Okay.
It was on these BBSs. Sorry, I graduated from the BBSs to logging on to this internet relay chat network called FNet, where I found the Cult of the Dead Cow channel, the CDC channel, and various other things. Like software cracking channels, and it was the Wild West back then. You could get serial numbers and crack codes for all the software that you needed. I didn't have any money, so that's the direction I went to get my PC software. So there was a software cracking cheat code, whatever you want to call it, serial number channel called Where's 95. And I became a member of this channel, and at one point, a person on there said that they would give someone a job in New Orleans, Louisiana, if whomever found an advanced copy of Command and Conquer 2, I believe. I can't Red Dawn, Red something. I didn't game, never have, never did, but I thought, yeah, I could use a job. And so I did. I got it and put it on an FTP site for him, and he downloaded it, installed it, it worked, and he sent me a invite to come work at his PC assembly company. They were pretty big. They had a big glossy magazine and a website, and so I borrowed money from my maternal grandfather, for a plane ticket, and packed a couple of suitcases, and
Just
off
like
to
that.
New Orleans I went.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so he was building back then, it wasn't just Dell computers and that sort of stuff. There's
Right.
a lot of smaller
The
companies. that were
beige
built-
boxes,
Yeah,
I think we call them now, right? They were just custom. They sold the high-end stuff, It was like, hey, they got Sound Blaster 2 audio cards, And so I really learned the most about computers working there, because the operating systems, well, I mean, if you think back, the PC part manufacturers didn't work well together. Everything from the motherboard to memory to CPU to everything, and these PC enthusiasts would build their dream computer back there, and it was our job to make it work. I also worked on the tech support desks. There was basically a call center of about 8 of us. And it was working on that desk that I learned I got to work with my first mainframe. So our PCs on our desk were networked over, I think, twisted copper. It was just serial to the mainframe, and the boss there, a guy named Brisky Ugbibor, who was a Nigerian immigrant, crazy smart guy.
And is this the same guy that said, if you give me an early version of this game?
No, the owner of the company was the one.
Okay.
It was a small company. I think there were maybe 40, 50 people total, from warehouse to the office part. But Brisky was in charge of all operations, but highly educated, smart guy. But he was a bit of a fascist overlord, management style guy. He used to walk around with a cricket bat and make us ask permission to go to the bathroom, or threaten to beat our heads in with the cricket bat if we didn't close calls. It was your high pressure, solve these people's problems, get them off the phone so we can get more, sold and done, and make sure everybody's happy on the way out. And it was particularly difficult to work tech support, phone only, troubleshooting someone's motherboard problem that was calling from California, that got their computer a month ago and have done who knows what to it since then. I mean, we had all your typical problems from, how do you figure out that somebody didn't even plug the power cable into it? That kind of thing, where I really learned to work with people and listen and use what I learned in the back assembling these things to help them find out what their problem was. It wasn't necessarily that the Sound Blaster driver wasn't working in Windows. It was they plugged it into the wrong slot, So it was a really kind of retrospectively learning opportunity to use troubleshooting skills that literally blindly. But I'll also learn, a lot about networking with the serial. And there was this guy that worked there, Justin, who ran all of our networking. And, that's when I really got into, when I moved to New Orleans, I also started going to 2600 meetings. One of my very good friends to this day I worked with at this computer place. I went to a bar one night and was chatting with the bartender there, and she asked me what I was doing in town. I told her where I worked. She said, "Oh, my boyfriend's coming in later. I'll introduce you. He's into all that stuff too." And this tall, gothy kid, skinny, gothy kid comes in a little bit later, introduces himself. He tells me his online name, handle, and I told him mine, and we've been talking for years, kind of thing. This random New Orleans bar, and we've been best friends since. And he's the one that was actually more involved in the Cult of the Dead Cow and all that whole scene, the whole scene thing, which he had been doing for years. And we started hanging out and went to DEF CON and did all those kind of things.
And similar to those bulletin boards and those text files from Cult of the Dead Cow, it's just a smorgasbord of things that they're talking about, or was it focused on phones or hacking, or like what was the content?
I think initially it was mostly telephones. It was phreaking, but then by the time I got into it, there was Linux and Unix and all that had become a lot more popular mid-90s, and it was open source and people were running it, and so the idea of running a more powerful operating system wasn't closed wall like Windows. Had become popular, and so people were writing more C code. They would talk about how to subvert systems.
So you guys would pick up these articles, and then there would be sort of, I guess, local meetups of like-minded people that are interested in the same stuff. Y'all would all get together and just sort of talk about things.
There was I may still go on, I don't know, but in major metro areas, 2600 magazine enthusiasts would meet up, I think one Friday night a month, and talk about hacking and phone systems and that kind of thing, just a common interest. And then in New Orleans, we had 2621, which was the older people then would leave the 2600 meeting and go to bars, and
the ones that could drink.
Right. Yeah, 2621. Yeah. And that's where the real discussions, we like to say, actually took place. The guy that I met at the bar, his real name's Ryan, told me about a job that was available to me there in New Orleans at Shell Offshore. And it was a contract job upgrading compact PCs from Windows 3.1 to Windows 95 throughout the building, and it paid probably double what I was earning over at the PC place. So,
were you at like headquarters, or were you actually Shell Offshore? Were you actually having to fly out to those rigs?
Shell Offshore is a division of Shell.
Okay.
The Shell parent company is actually a Dutch company, right?
Right.
It's Shell Offshore specifically. The headquarters, the office, yes, is there in the CBD in New Orleans, but they are the organizing body, I guess, or whatever, parent to all offshore activities. So once we did do all the big upgrades there in the office building, the next stage of the big rollout was doing the computers out on the offshore platforms.
So you're back to the helicopters.
Yeah, it was great. It was wonderful. We would get up, we'd be assigned a certain number of platforms to do a week, and we'd get up at 3 or 4 in the morning on a Monday, drive down to Fourchon, Louisiana, or one of the other places where they have helicopter ports, and jump on a helicopter. We'd have, I don't know, 2 or 3 compact PCs, and they would organize all the transport. We'd load them on the helicopter, fly off to one platform, do the configuration, upgrade, switch over, make sure the microwave transceiver's working, etc. Sleep. Next day we'd catch a helicopter over to the next platform. Yeah, so they were rolling it out across all their platforms in the Gulf.
Did you guys have like a roughneck schedule where it's like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or because y'all are flying back, it's...
No, we were very much the office hours type. We would go out on a Monday and work till, I think, Wednesday, and then come back on Thursday and then have Friday off. We worked 4 days ago. It was a fantastic schedule because we would go and do that, and then we'd have 3 days back home in New Orleans and go to our 2600 meetings and meet with our friends. And that time of my life was, I don't even, people bring up TV shows and popular culture stuff from, let's say, 95 to 99. I have never seen an episode of Seinfeld, Friends, whatever those shows were that people talk about. It was just 100% spent on computers and networking hacking. From the time you wake up to the time you fall asleep, it was just all of that. It was just wonderful. It was like there was nothing else, because the fascination and focus was just about learning, taking it all in, making something of it, and this fascinating new change that's going on that nobody else seemed to see. It was like you're behind the scenes Oz kind of thing, doing all the things, and nobody knows what you're doing, and it was wonderful. And those people that you did meet and you shared that with became your friends, and it wasn't a closed or clique group. It was just like, how can anyone think to do anything but this? I don't know, they're crazy. This is the future. I know it's the future. We're living in the future, kind of thing. It was wonderful.
And is that where you first really wanted to take what's sort of a passion and a hobby and try to start pushing into as a career?
Yeah, and believe it or not, back to that FNet thing, the CDC ties. I met some of the fellows from L0pht. L0pht was a hacker collective out of Boston, Massachusetts, where these fellas had started a collective type place and rented a space and brought all their computers in there and did some really great research. And I'm sure everybody that may watch this knows who they are and what their name is, but they became really famous later. And anyway, I got introduced to Chris Weisopel, Weld Pond from the L0pht at DEF CON 3, I think, whichever one was in 1996 or 7. I went with Ryan, the guy from New Orleans, to my first DEF CON. Anyway, I became friendly with those L0pht guys, and we started talking back and forth, and I was working at the government contractor then.
Well, and on L0pht, and some people, particularly some of the younger folks might not be familiar with them. When I was growing up, I knew who they were. I remember all the research that they were doing, but they were sort of always at arm's length. I didn't actually know them, and I've only recently come to know them through you, and you making those introductions to Chris and to Dildog and to everyone else. But L0pht, they testified in front of Congress at one point, and they talked about how they could take the internet down in
couple of guys
30
in
seconds or 30 minutes.
30 minutes, I think. There's the
famous panel.
The famous, I call it the Last Supper of the internet. Picture of them testifying before Congress with Mudge Jesus in the middle there. Yeah, but I got to know them, and I think it's kind of worth mentioning. We met in person. While a lot of these relationships were online, I think what cemented it was we met in person, and that was thanks to Jeff Moss. Jeff Moss is the founder of the conference, DEF CON, which has been going now for 30 years, maybe?
Something like that, yeah.
He provided a space where people that shared that common interest could come together and pseudo-anonymously meet together and share thoughts and ideas and have a place to be, to form a physical community instead of just an online community. And, here we are 30 years later, and most of the people that I think you're going to have in this series were involved at some level with all those things. We still get together at least once a year at either DEF CON. Well, it's between the two, Black Hat and DEF CON now, but it provided a place, I think, for veracity purposes. Once you meet someone in purpose, you're like, okay, yeah, you're not just a name on a screen. But it rooted, I guess, or cemented those relationships. And so shortly after that DEF CON, Chris Weisopel, who was working at Bolt, Bernick, and Newman at the time, BBN, where most of the L0pht guys ended up working at the same time. BBN's famous for being the company, the organization that received the grant from the U.S. government in the 70s, I think, and established the DARPANet.
From DARPA, yeah.
Right. So it was, in my opinion, the origin of the internet in the United States. And so Chris called me and said, "Hey, we got this job opening coming up as a security engineer. Why don't you come up and interview for it?" Wow, that was the shit. So flew up there and interviewed, got the job offer. So in a period from building PCs in the back of this warehouse, where I think I was making $13 an hour, to 3 years later making $90,000, and moving up to work at BBN was just like dream. Now I have a career path, right? So moved up to Boston. That's where I discovered that I hate cold weather.
Yeah, me too.
And being a native Texan, I don't think I have fully evolved to be able to actually exist in temperatures, below 30 degrees for more than several days at a time.
So did you make it through more than one winter, or was
I made it through one winter. I didn't have a car, so I was taking the T everywhere. But it was when I moved up there that I really got introduced in person to some of the, greatest minds in what we now call cybersecurity. And once again, nothing else existed. This was it. I got a roommate. I found a roommate, Dill Dog, another member of the L0pht. We moved in an apartment together. Everything from waking to sleeping was computer security. Everything.
You were roommates with Chris?
Yeah.
Wow.
He was my roommate.
Okay.
Actually, when I moved up there, I'm just a small town kid. I found my apartment in New Orleans in the back of the newspaper. I found my next apartment in New Orleans by rooming with my favorite waiter at the local pizza place, and lived with him there. And then so I really had no concept on how to find housing anywhere other than New Orleans. So moved up there and thought, well, I'll just
find a spot.
Find a spot. And I got up there and they're like, "What do you mean just find an apartment? You got to find a realtor." I'm like, "Wow, I need somewhere to stay." And Chris, Dill Dog's girlfriend at the time, was Lady Ada Lamore Freed.
Also a very famous engineer, right?
She's mind-blowingly smart engineer. She was at MIT at the time. But she said to me, we were just out at dinner or something. She said, "Oh, well, my parents' basement's available. It's fully built out. You can stay there until you get an apartment." And it was just like this instant community, this acceptance of, well, if you're working with them and they know you, then yeah, just stay. And I had this great apartment. It was only a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. Yeah, so that was my introduction to Boston. I was able to stay there in Lemore's parents' basement. And then Chris and I found an apartment together in Watertown. And it became basically the hub spot for people that were in that scene throughout Boston. All the people that weren't involved with the L0pht that were still friendly, would come there. We would have an annual, they call it Grillathon. They still do it to this day. It's a very kind of undergroundy thing for hackers and cyber folks in the Boston area. And we have the big grill out there. It was a I don't know if I can talk about. Yeah, sure, why not? So there was this tank of nitrous, a 5-foot tank of nitrous that was passed around between various hacker spots, and it ended up in Dog in my apartment. So we were completely legal to go fill this thing up. I'm not going to say who did it, but it's somebody that you might have on here. So always kept the tank filled. Of course, we were hackers, so we figured out how to build a nozzle that you could take your trash bag and hook it up. And so a lot of the parties, I would say, we didn't drink or anything. We just stand around with a garbage bag. It was like a cyber Fish concert or Grateful Dead concert. Everyone's standing around being silly.
And so is it just, this immersion that I keep hearing, so basically BBM by day you're working, and then at night you're just hanging out with the L0pht crew, either
L0pht and New Hack City folks.
All the various Boston folks.
By this time, the great migration to the Bay Area from the Boston cyber folks, it all kind of crashed. I think a lot of that Boston scene, had their roots in MIT, right?
Right.
From the old MIT hackers, 60s, 70s kind of thing. So that kind of culture was regarded as commonplace, right? The kind of critical thinking and hanging out together just to discuss these ideas in more of an academic environment than anything else. Whereas when I experienced it outside of Boston, it was edgy and cool and underground. Boston, it was just like, yeah, we're going to go hang out in whatever, Copley Square, and have coffee and talk about these things, or do some war dialing from the telephones, or, the 2600 meeting there was in, one of the big financial buildings had a food court in the bottom of it downtown. I've forgotten what it is, but it was immersive. When people say you want to learn a foreign language, go live in the country, that is what you did when you're working in our industry. I was working as a security engineer. This was 98, 99, and that role really wasn't in many companies. Right. But at BBN it was, and it was a role that was still being established. Even the need for it. So we worked for the IT manager who reported to the CIO, John Puckett, John Burke, Alan Sonnenberg, in order. We worked for these fellows. We were IT security, but Mudge, Chris Weissopel, Brian Oblivion, these guys that worked at BBN really took that role and advanced it to a point where it was considered smart to bring the security people in when you were planning or architecting or doing all these things, because they're at BBN, they understood the need for, let's just say, network security being an important thing in the design process. And so by the time I got in, the seeds were already planted for the culture of the business to to promote and or need security awareness, security design, security architecture, all these things. So these guys, these people had already, done the things there. And it was under the leadership of John Puckett, who was the CIO, that he grew those roles into something which, now we know as cybersecurity, right? And so worked there for a bit, and then Mr. Puckett, who I admire greatly.
You mentioned how good of a leader he was and how good of a manager he was. Like, what was it that made him so great?
He took the time to explain to me personally, how the next 20 years could go if I wanted to pursue this.
Where does woo-woo start to fit in? Is that at this time? Was that earlier? Was that later?
Yeah, it's about that time. It was woo-woo was founded by then a very young man, Matt Conover, goes by Shock. And he was in the Boston area working. He was working out there with another guy, Jordan Ritter, Blake Watts, and we had this IRC channel. We knew each other from 2600 meetings, that kind of thing. They were peripheral L0pht friends, just part of that whole group. Andrew Ryder's another one. And Matt had formed this loose collective of security white hat, very specifically, security researchers, and named an IRC channel, Pound Woo Woo, and just invited various people that are interested in computer security into it. It was a closed channel.
And that name Woo Woo, was it deliberate? Was that just kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke, or
all of those things?
Yeah.
It was kind of. He was 17. I don't know what to say about it. I was 27. Anyway, I got involved because of the super smart people. It was Doug Song, Jan Koum, what's his name? Facebook guy, Sean Parker, who was also Napster, Jordan Ritter, Sean Fanning,
also
Napster,
yeah.
Matt Conover, Blake Watts, Jamie Reed, Adam O'Donnell, Java Man, CDC. So there's cross-pollination of all these people. But we how can I forget Seth McGann? Just working on everything from reverse engineering protocols to software to doing all these things, and just having fun with it. There was none of this, we're going to be a group kind of thing. It wasn't, we're going to be a hacking group or any of that. It was just people sharing ideas and all that. And so for me, it was good because they all their research, they just released open, free. We didn't care. We obviously, everybody followed bug track and did all that kind of thing. There was nothing ever malicious. It was just a group of people that were interested in computer security, software security.
And so you guys were like writing open source security tools, you're writing exploits, all of the above, and then just
vulnerability research more than anything. Yeah.
Okay.
I can't remember if we ever released exploit code, but we did this one year do Woo Giving, which is we released a vulnerability every day for the Thanksgiving holiday for some weird reason. I thought it was going to be a good idea and it'd be fun. And so we did this whole, it used to still be up on the webpage. I don't think it's functioning anymore, but we did fun things.
And eventually you guys get picked up. We get some notoriety from that, and you get picked up in TechCrunch, and there's this famous article, the $1 Billion Hacker Club.
Oh, right, yeah.
Is that just from who was in it?
That was much later,
Okay.
yeah. Okay. But, so back then, the $1 Billion Hacker Club is referencing Jan Koum, right?
And Jan Koum was WhatsApp?
He's the founder of WhatsApp. But
and now Signal?
I don't know where he is now.
Okay.
I think he's living on his super yacht off the island of Mallorca.
As one does.
Another woo-woo member, Simon Rosas Fimmerling, is from Mallorca. And he sent me a picture just recently of Jan's yacht off the coast of Mallorca, so he might be there. But what I was going to say is, back then, Jan was a network engineer for Yahoo at the time, or Woo. And I mean, it's getting old's funny because you think back of these conversations you're having on IRC, and it would be, we're seeing this on our network. What do you guys think? And it would be Jan talking about this problem or whatever. And then Doug Song, founder of Arbor Networks and Duo, and Doug Song back there, I think he was working for NFR, Network Flight Recorder. No, it was the firewall company. I don't remember. But Jan, I think he just maybe he hadn't even graduated from Michigan. Anyway, so it was just like, we don't care where Jan works or where Sean works or I work at BBN. It was this sharing of issues, problems. Oh, I saw this, but that's a bug track exploit for our vulnerability. It was a I hate to use the term, but a good old boy network. Is that right? But it was this sharing and helping and doing all these things. And back right before Napster started.
And
speaking of sharing,
when it first kicked off, but Doug hadn't founded a company yet. You hadn't been the CEO of Logan Group. Correct. Or Sean Parker at Facebook. That all came later.
That all came in
at that time. You were hardcore security engineers, just really focused on security research.
All pretty much on the same level, I guess.
Okay, and so that continues on. You maintain this relationship, but you do leave BBN, you said, and you move on to
ToySmart.
Okay.
Which was a startup funded by Disney for selling smart educational toys.
How long did you stay at ToySmart, you and Mr. Puckett?
It was only in operation. I'm going to say 9 months. I can't recall, but Disney actually pulled the funding. Yeah, during the .com crash.
The bubble crash.
Yeah, yeah. I don't remember the exact mechanism of it, but big meeting one day. Hey, everybody! Disney pulled the plug. You get 2 weeks. Thanks.
And so, what did you follow Mr. Puckett to the next gig, or
No,
where did you go from there?
No, a friend of mine, Michael Bernardchek, who was also in the scene, who I knew once again from the Pound Hack route, all that kind of group, contacted me because they were building a cybersecurity consulting company where he was working, a company called Guardent.
Okay.
And they were looking. Michael was over in the professional services arm, and they were looking to build out a research and development division. And it was the same time that the L0pht guys, right around the same time, L0pht guys started At Stake. And some fellas that I knew that I met at the original DEF CON that I went to back in 6, 7, had started. They were at Ernst & Young. Guy named George Kurtz.
Heard of him. Yeah.
Chris Prozice, Will Chan, Stuart McClure. Those guys started Foundstone. So there's 3 major consultancies: Foundstone, Guardent, and At Stake. All started about the same time. That's also where I met Mike Schiffman, who was the director of research and development. They hired me on as manager of research and development, and I got busy hiring the woo-woo guys, some of the woo-woo guys, to be our research and development team. Mike Schiffman brought over some people that he knew, Sean Bracken, and some other folks. And but I hired Matt Conover, Blake Watts. These are the woo-woo people. Jamie Fullerton, Adam O'Donnell, and some other computer security people I know. And we built out Guardant's research and development team.
And so I had a chance to work at Foundstone. It was post the acquisition, but George Kurtz was still there. Can you just talk a little bit about, for those that aren't familiar, just how big of a deal Guardent was, Foundstone, At Stake, in terms of how they shaped the industry and just where everything came from? And I guess ISS as well.
Yeah,
they were
ISS,
more product,
there were
right?
some they were thinking ISS was you could say they were along there, but they were product focused, which now we know is probably where a lot of them should have gone, because now knowing business like we know, we speak in multiples of services versus product and all those fancy things that value a company. But yeah, so those three computer consult or security consulting companies really shaped the hacker ethos into computer security consulting companies. You had Ernst & Young, Arthur Andersen, all these that were building their cybersecurity services capabilities up at the same time. But the L0pht guys, and then us over at Guardent with Schiffman, and you could call us Root or Hack or Woo Woo or whatever. It was a mix of folks. And then the Foundstone guys actually came out of Ernst & Young. But they brought the hacker ethos into Foundstone with them. George and Chris and I think some of the Stuart wrote the first Hacking Exposed book while they were at Foundstone, right? So it was a really great, for lack of better terms, branding exercise to create this hacker mindset and use that hacker mindset to help people understand the seriousness of cybersecurity to businesses, foundations, organizations. And a lot of people capitalized on it, or sorry, a lot of companies capitalized on it. But it was also really great for we hackers to learn about business. So we had great leaders at Guardent. We had Maria Serino as our CEO. Now she's gone on to have just this storied career. But she came over from Razorfish, which was I think a big marketing branding type organization. And so if you paid attention, and actually I was a little bit older than most of the folks in the R&D group. So I tried to pay attention and be included in the business meetings that went on beyond client meetings, internal business meetings. See how, Guardent was venture capital backed. So to see how these things fit together, I didn't have an MBA or any kind of business background, but it was an opportunity to learn how these things actually work. And Maria Serino, once again, a wonderful leader, had the ability to see if you were interested in these things and would take the time to teach you these things. And so we got a firm foundation in business. Kurtz and those folks over there luckily had that business background. I say luckily, maybe it wasn't, but they had that business background that they brought into Foundstone, and they built, a company around cybersecurity. Guardent was kind of different because it was the other way. They built a company and then brought in the cybersecurity and the consulting. And At Stake brought in, I forget their first CEO, but they brought in the business people like Guardent and, brought in the hacking ethos underneath it and sold under that banner. So those three companies really shaped and formed the way corporate America, at a minimum, maybe outside of America, I don't know, but viewed cybersecurity in their business process. They laid the foundation for people. I think most of our job was education, about how important these things were and were going to become in the future to American businesses.
And, like you said, the Andersen Consulting and E&Y, the big four had their own consulting, but here in these three companies, it was extremely entrepreneurial. Like everything that you just said, I experienced that at Foundstone, where they would give you access to anything that you were curious about. They would encourage you to learn outside of, the job that they had hired you for. And it was just this hotbed of where really the hardcore security researchers, whether it was Woo or these other cases, they tended to run through those and ISS as well, right? Versus the bigger ones. And so you guys had a chance, even though it was getting professionalized, to kind of work together, doing stuff at Guardent. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. And at Guardent, at least, they also brought in project managers and other business level people that were out of the big 4 or 5, whatever it was back then. And we had a very open working relationship with these folks because we had to teach them what we were doing so that they could help better secure and do all those things with the clients. And this was also the same time that the CISSP sprung up as a certification, ISC2, IS2C, whatever. So we were busy, at Guardent at least, teaching these consultants that we had on board that came over from the Big Five or wherever they came from, larger companies, how to study for their CISSP so we could, at least at Guardent, we have this many CISSPs, kind of marketing thing. So the entire spirit of the company was entrepreneurial, as you said. It was more like a hacker collective than it was like an accounting firm, for instance, right? So the free flow of ideas and respect for different people's positions was high. Kathy Gerg was one of our consultants. She came over from a business consultant side, and I can remember her and some of the other consultants, just dropping into the lab and talking for hours about anything, an architectural diagram or this kind of thing. And there was never any of this, we're too cool for you, or vice versa. He's, sits in the dark lab all day and punches around at the screen, listens to techno music. There was none of that. It was a group effort to build this company into something to better serve the security needs of their clients.
Well, what you guys built, it's had an impact on the entire industry, all the companies that birthed after that. But, like you said, there was venture involved. And so they need an exit. IBM eventually, ISS eventually goes to IBM. Foundstone gets acquired by McAfee. At stake Symantec. And then you guys...
VeriSign.
VeriSign, yeah. How did that entrepreneurial spirit and that culture change as things get professionalized, money is involved, an acquirer comes in? What did that look like?
I was gone by the time the acquisition occurred.
Okay.
But
did you start to see some of that?
Absolutely. Well, sure, it did, because you do what we eventually started calling, MBA spreadsheet security. Everything became billable hours and
P&L.
That's where I learned P&L and all those things that you learn. Because you have to have that for a consultancy to survive, to actually make money, to actually get value. But I don't think we Guardent ever lost the security-minded mission. Even though it did get acquired by VeriSign, it stayed an island to itself within VeriSign and kept that spirit going before complete transformation occurred, where they were integrated and all the services got in. But I will say this. We knew the times were changing when the free food vending machine got removed from the office. That was a mile marker, if you will, on the road at Guardent. When the free snack machines left the building, we knew times were changing.
And so in the late 90s, early 2000s, it's sort of this fringe culture. It's in the spirit of free and unfettered information. It's in the spirit of you accept me, I accept you. It gets professionalized and people start to turn it into careers. When those first acquisitions happened, and maybe this is the wrong word, but I'm just curious your thoughts. Did the industry or what we were doing, did it begin to lose some of its innocence at that point as things start to be about the bottom line and stuff like that?
It did, and I joke with George Kurtz and Chris Prozice about this all the time, because I think year 2 or 3 of Foundstone, they took a marketing or PR photo, and they all had matching shirts with monogrammed Foundstone here, and they were either on a staircase or an escalator or something. And so we cool kids were all like, ha, you guys sold out kind of thing. It was just kind of like, hey, nice matching shirts, meet at the country club later, that kind of thing. And but they weren't out of step with the band we were, right, kind of thing. And yeah, the industry was changing. It was, I guess, normalizing towards the accounting firm type structure, because in the end, a services business is really, really difficult to maintain, right? You may know this. So to maintain the hacker mentality, I mean, right? You can create that pod of people, but you can't create that company of people and be profitable. But if you do, and you're able to do that, it is a constant maintenance effort, right? It's not just, you can't, somebody's got to wear the sweater vest, And we used to joke about that because at Guardent, they hired a new VP to come in from IBM, and all he wore was sweater vests. And we were like, vending machine's gone, guy with the sweater vest is here. Okay. But, it's got to go somewhere that, it's got to go the direction of people that know how to pivot in a spreadsheet, build pivot tables in a spreadsheet. It just has to make money, and so we can all keep our jobs. We're all getting paid really well to do cool hacker stuff. But in the end, a business has to succeed. So, but back to your point, the industry was moving that way because, as you mentioned, Symantec, McAfee, IBM purchased those companies, and those were corporate entities that were structured. They knew how to make money, and they knew how to return money to their investors or stockholders, depending on whoever it was. It was a proven business case. It was the emergence of security product time, right? And so most people that I knew from our industry then went directly into product. And so it was really cool actually developing solutions instead of just providing solutions. So that's when a lot of the creativity really took off. Martin Resch is a good example of that. He took an open source software and built, one could say, built an industry around this ideal, right?
And this is going from snort to
source
fire.
Yep. Right? Yep. I talked to him recently in Las Vegas, and we were reminiscing. He was like, you wouldn't believe my first, 5 meetings with venture capitalists pitching this idea of taking open source software and making it into a commercial business. Now, I remember Red Hat had done this already, right? They had gone from an open source operating system and turned it into a business. So the basics of the idea was there, but not for like a real product. And so a lot of people went to work for Marty, or not a lot of people. Some people went to work for Marty. My former business partner, Jed Hale, Jeff Nathan, all these guys were working in Marty's living room, developing this product. Other people started up, Marcus Raynham had his, the whole product rush took off around this time. So while we did transfer out of the services, a lot of the really creative, bright people went to work in the product industry then.
And like you said, the hacking starts to get on your own time, right? You're kind of doing it off hours. And so is that where the inception of the Honeynet Project came from? You needed mission, you needed to focus back to the roots, and you started to build that off on your own time?
Exactly when it did start. During that transformation, Lance Spitzner, the founder of the Honeynet Project, started this. It wasn't even a nonprofit when he started. He just discovered, he was a tank commander, in the Army. He wasn't cyber-y, I guess, but he was very, very much a computer security focused type person after he got out. I think he worked for Sun Microsystems. And, his idea of instrumenting a computer to be vulnerable in order to be broken into and record the tool, tactics, techniques of the attacker, and then release that information to the security industry free of charge, was just a notion to help, to give back.
A noble project, and that's how our relationship started. You were holding, I guess, a local chapter meeting in Austin, and I got to meet you through Ryan W. Smith. He brought me, and I got to see what you guys were up to, and it is a noble project.
You hosted at your office. Thank you.
That's right. Well, we were so small at the time. It was
a
virtual office.
That's right.
It was a virtual office. Yeah, we rented a conference room. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And so with such a noble project, why this whole, EL0pht Project Mayhem, where they started going after everyone, why would they go after the Honeynet Project and start trying to hack everyone, all the researchers and stuff?
Yeah.
I don't get that.
I think initially it's because they were afraid of being identified.
Oh, okay.
Being attributed to the things that they were doing. But then it became... they were trying to then it turned into trying to discredit the people, me, Lant, everyone that was involved in doing it, by mocking or hacking us back or saying, like their abilities to do this are low because we can do this to them. How can you trust them? And then I don't even know why they stopped one day, but I have a feeling that some of them might have been arrested. I don't know, but it just one day. After publicly, now the kids call it doxing, getting doxed and home addresses, putting out places,
and that's what I remember reading about was it got very personalized, and whether it was Honeynet or people from Woo or Kevin Mitnick, they were breaking into their systems and then they were publicly doxing information.
Yeah, they were calling it white hat hate or something like that. I still have a PDF of the map that they drew, identifying our online handle to our real name and then to the companies we worked for. It was like this whole, we're exposing these companies for hiring these horrible people that are doing good things. It never really made sense. A lot of it was mischief. They were younger.
Yeah.
And the ironic twist of fate is they were being the new counterculture. The counterculture anarchists, just for mayhem, right? So
from Honeynet Project, you found mission again. You're starting to work on something on your own time, nonprofit, and again, that's super commendable. But the industry is starting to change behind you. You're seeing, things get professionalized, and so ultimately, from what I understand, you decide to actually start your own company, the Logan Group. Is that right after you left kind of Guardent, Verizon?
Yeah, I went to work very briefly, less than a year, for a product company in Houston, Texas called Pentasafe. They were originally an AS400 security company, but they had pivoted and written agents, and it would be asset management now, as we would call it. But anyway, it was a great company. Lee Kushner, the infamous InfoSec recruiter to the stars, found me a position there. And the one big takeaway I have from that short, I think it was maybe even 10 months of working there, is the way you could run a company that size. It was 300 or 400 people at that point. They'd come out of a kind of like almost a Steve Jobs garage type, setup. And they brought Doug Irwin on after the fact and all this, but he fostered a sense of inclusiveness and responsibility, whether it was your job or not. I was manager of research and development. We're writing security signatures and this kind of thing. But if we identified an opportunity that they were going to lose, for instance, as agenda items like what opportunities we have, where are they going, where are we going, Doug would ask the person, VP of sales or whoever in charge, what's missing in this opportunity? What do we need? Oh, you need an expert in insecurity on this thing? Logan, go with him. Or he would say to his assistant, we're going to see that client tomorrow. That potential opportunity, it's my job, the CEO, to make sure we get that over the line. Not, why didn't you close your quota? It was making sure the company functioned as a product sales company. And it was at that point I felt like I had worked for the right people throughout the past 7-8 years, that I now knew how to gain traction with customers for services and made enough good relationships with people that had started product companies, which we discussed, right? We were on the rise, that I could start my own company. And so I started the Logan Group. And I had two business partners when I started, Adam O'Donnell and Jed Hale. And we slowly built our client base up over the first 2 years of both product and services companies. We had the pleasure of landing some really big up-and-coming companies, Sourcefire, Marty Resch's company, Foundstone. We're developing a product. We helped them write some of their scripting language. We did the 3D visualization engine for Sourcefire, and a couple of other product companies that we did some work for in the security space, which are NDA kind of thing.
And so, because O'Donnell is Java Man, and so that's CDC. Hale, was he also somehow?
It was Honeynet Project.
Honeynet Projects. And so these friendships form into business relationships, and you just continue on with these people.
And the people that came to work for me at the Logan Group were also out of various groups of people that I met. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So.
And so the Logan Group, you're doing these really cool projects. You're also doing them for folks that you know, whether it's Foundstone or Snart and Martin Rash, and is it kind of getting back to mission, kind of getting back to the fun and focusing on things that matter? How long did you support that in the Logan Group? That you had a pretty long run, or like 15?
14.
13, 14 years?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, the Logan Group still exists, but actively, 13, 14 years, which rolled me into my next gig. I took some time off to take care of a little flood incident that occurred down in Wimberley, Texas, around 2006.
I think that was the next time we saw each other.
16, sorry. Yeah, 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah, and took some time off and rebuilt everything. And then my old Facebook client from when I had the Logan Group, the former chief security officer, came calling and told me he was building this cool new company, and the whole company was built on mission. And he hooked me. And so I went to work for him, for Max Kelly. And we proceeded to build a very special, mission-oriented cybersecurity company. And while we were doing so, we were able to build some cool products. We supported a lot of... Redacted, in my opinion, was unique. Max had the great idea to blend in actual boots on the ground global investigative services alongside the cybersecurity services component. The second year of Redacted, we built out a global investigation division of the company. We set upon the course of licensing a lot of the Redacted analysts as private investigators in different states, led by our global investigative services, which gives access to loads of data that most people don't have access to legally.
And meaning, like, not, like you said, not this APT from Iran or here or there. You would get it down to, like, it is these individuals that are responsible for this?
It is this person, this name, this address, in Jakarta, Indonesia. They work at this mobile phone store. They are the actors we have the first that I know of publicized report of the Nigerian National Police arresting a 914 scammer. This actor very specifically fraudulently obtained W-4s via email from a large corporate client and was busy doing the 1099 scams, filing for all this. When they brought us in, we set up an entire fake music festival in a major U.S. city as a front, because we attributed who the guy was that had stolen this. and his fraud was his part-time gig. He owned a restaurant in Lagos, and he also owned a music production business. He's some terrible artists. They were bad. But we set up this music festival, fronted it, backed it, everything, and had the associate producer of this festival promoter reach out directly to him to license his artist, his African music festival to license some of his artists to play on the stage and stuff between acts, but for him to upload the artist's music, which we paid him for legitimately, he had to install our encrypted transportation client in the 80-page EULA that he clicked yes on to install this. He legally gave us access to every device in his possession. Therefore, we could retrieve the document stolen from our client and then provide proof to the Nigerian National Police, who came and arrested him, and he got prison time. So we were able to do real investigation work and not stop with, oh yeah, it's those people in that country, they're untouchable because they pay off the police. So
that's insane.
We were back on mission. And we had, at Redacted, we had the people that came out of various intelligence agencies that do this on nationwide, these Potemkin village type operations. We had analysts and linguists, and it was just a remarkable place to work.
That is insane. I mean, that's almost nation state level sophistication that you're doing. And you mentioned attribution at the Logan Group. I read an article on you. I can't remember if it was Dark Reading or Security Week or whatever the case was, but it was a story about someone stealing your phone in the UK.
My iPhone. And I loved that iPhone. I think it was one of the first iPhones.
Can you tell that story? And I don't know how accurate
Sure.
the article was,
Yeah.
but I guess these skills are coming in
pretty
handy.
Good job on that. Kelly Jackson Higgins, who's now I think she's the editor-in-chief at Dark Reading. I knew her through the Honeynet Project. Okay. So this event did happen to me, but after it happened and everything occurred, I called her and just pitched the story I did to her because I thought it was funny. But my business partner, Jed Hale, and I had gone to Dublin, Ireland to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Logan Group. And we went to see Roger Waters perform The Wall at O2 Stadium and do the Guinness tour and, distilleries and all that kind of thing. And I actually am friends with the lead carpenter set guy that was doing Roger Waters' The Wall. It's a friend of mine that lives in New Orleans. And he had invited us over there, got us tickets and all that. But we were out with him and the crew at a pub the night before the concert. And it was cold in West Ireland. And I had just left my phone in my jacket on the back of the chair at the pub, and somebody stole my phone, right? The next day, I know. I was also there. We were also there. We built Facebook was still our client. We had gone there to their Facebook offices for some meetings. But anyway, the next day, when I discovered my phone was missing, I immediately started trying to figure out who it was. But no go. But so I returned home, and a couple of months later, I get a message on Twitter, a private message from a made-up name. He's in Ireland. He works at a mobile phone shop. He thinks they've found my phone, but they want to verify it's me before they send it back to me. Could I please give him my
passcode? No,
it was whatever Mobile Me used to be, right? Your passphrase, because they need to unlock the phone and verify it's me. I knew what it was. It's a scammer, the guy that stole it or whoever had sold it to. So anyway, I played the guy along, but I instantly went to work on the Twitter name that had sent me the message. Access some data sources that I had access to both at Twitter and Facebook, correlated the two, did some IP tracking over at Facebook, the same one at Twitter, but see which accounts used that IP in Ireland for Facebook accounts, figured out who the Facebook accounts were, which was the real ID of this guy, his sister, and his mom, who all lived in the same house in Dublin. Anyway, it turned out I strung him along over here on the fake Twitter thing while I was figuring out who he was. And then finally I sent him an email that was like, look, dude, here's who you are. Here's where you work. This is your sister. This is your mom. This is where she works. This is where you can do one of two things. You can not give it back to me and I'll send the cops over to pick it up for me. Or you can take it, put it in this size box, take it to the Facebook office in Dublin, drop it off, because the Facebook office in Ireland has an x-ray machine for everything that goes through. So I knew that he wouldn't F around and just leave a box or whatever, right? So, and so the security guy that worked in the Facebook Dublin office received it for me and
you got it back.
Shipped it home to me. Yeah, so I'd already replaced it, but it was just the sweet victory of getting someone in Ireland to spend their own damn money to send me my phone back who had stolen it from me. Was just a great success. That was so much fun.
That's also insane in terms of your ability to attribute, and that's kind of bringing us up to here. And so, I have a kind of a closing question for you, which is this: Warlocks, why are you doing this, and what are you hoping to get out of it? And before you answer, I just want to tell you on camera just how instrumental you've been in all of this. The time that you've given towards this, not just interviewing today, but the amount of help that you've given, the book that you just gave, and just everything else. You've been, I know we've known each other for a long time, but, and dude, it's not just the time, it's the network where you're bringing in your network through all these facets, these people that you've known for 20 years. Like, these relationships are very important to you, and you're just so giving in all of it. And number one, thank you. But number two, why are you doing this? What are you hoping to get out of Warlocks? What are you hoping that this will become?
First off, thanks. I really appreciate that. When you initially approached me about the project, I thought about it and I thought, nah. There have been documentaries done. There's exposés. There's been good, bad, poorly funded. I mean, we're in the age of TikTok. Who knows what it may be. But I thought about it, and to gush a little bit back to you, to give you some credit, you're one of the most altruistic, honest people in this industry. And I thought about what you've built with Praetorian, what you've done. You've always had your level of standards for not only yourself and your services, but you've built out across your company. And so I gave it more thought because of who you are than what you're creating. And so when I realized that you were going to give the same amount of dedication and honesty to this project as you do the other things that I've seen you throughout our relationship, I decided that it would be worth my time. So I started thinking about how I could use myself to help you in this project. And my Rolodex, kids, a Rolodex is an old card file that we use to keep addresses and how I could use my network to assist you, because thinking on it more and reflecting on what I was going to say to you or how we were going to interact about these things, I had these brilliant moments of colorful remembrances. Most of them didn't even come up during the interview, but some did, and some have yet to come out, and they still might. We'll see. I don't know, but more for me, it wasn't being able to tell my story. I wanted to tell my story so others will tell theirs, because this amazing, all these different people's experiences and paths and journeys into and throughout cybersecurity, I'm hoping this project can put them together in this I think it's going to be a brilliant mosaic of what our industry came out of, how it transformed, and how it all goes together in this great picture of where we are today, and will transform even more and more and get more beautiful and colored and varied as we go. And I'm looking forward more to seeing other people's experiences than telling mine. I don't feel mine's that exciting or interesting, but it is a perspective, and it's a perspective no one else has. And so hopefully it'll go up there and be just a small piece of that.
Well, you've had a big piece in all of this, and I'm just incredibly grateful for it. So thank you.
Thank you.
I see